Hello and welcome to the NewWorldReview, your source for everything anime and manga, and today I would like to discuss a particularly memorable event in the life of Hunter x Hunter, being the conflict between Kurapika and Uvogin, as well as how masterfully it embodies the entire concept of revenge. So this is one of my personal favorite fights within the series, and in my opinion it's a very classic example of Togashi just going and elevating the shonen genre, because combat can be a really basic and sometimes even boring exercise even in some of the greater titles, but what Togashi tends to do quite brilliantly with key battles in Hunter x Hunter is make it so that the actual fighting is completely secondary to an idea or a character moment being explored. And those ideas and moments will come shortly after this break, which is designed to prod you into subscribing to the NewWorldReview, which will result in regular Hunter x Hunter content being uploaded straight into your YouTube feed. And also, because I'm a bit of a self-shill, I also need to make you aware that I have a new channel called Team Pokemon, which is all about experiencing the wonderful world of Pokemon all through the eyes of a 30-year-old passive-aggressive retail worker. So even if you're not a Pokemon fan, the channel is quite fun, so I hope to see you over there as well. But back to things you're actually, interested in. This particular fight tells you everything you need to know about Kurapika and his path going forward in the story, which is all centered on the concept of revenge, which is usually a very fun idea to explore, given how easy it is to get on board with it as a reader or watcher. There's an innate sense of satisfaction one can gain from following a character seeking and successfully enacting revenge. Think stuff like Kill Bill and just how wildly entertaining it is, which is bizarre because there isn't that much to it when you think about it. Just a woman slicing people up all over the globe. That's effectively it, but it works well enough thanks to that raw driving force of revenge. And that is very much the crutch of the Kurapika character in Hunter x Hunter. In the very beginning of the series, he had a powerful mission statement, which consisted of him saying, "I do not fear death. What I fear is that my rage will one day fade away." So revenge, and I guess arguably some sort of perceived justice, is like oxygen to Kurapika. At this stage, he can't really live without it. It's twisted, it is unhealthy, and it is ultimately unsatisfactory and empty, as revenge often is. And that is what this fight against Uvogin goes to great lengths to portray. But I first want to dispel any grand ideas that Kurapika went into his Phantom Troop crusade with a justifiable cause. So obviously that group having murdered his entire clan in an act of genocide is quite possibly one of the most enraging thoughts one could have, and it's very natural to be on the side of Kurapika here, wanting to hunt these guys down and deliver retribution. And an argument can be made that the Phantom Troop are simply too dangerous to allow to exist in this world. And if that was Kurapika's main driving force, then this would be a completely different matter, as that would be an almost noble cause actually, using your pain to secure the betterment of the world at large. Our blonde boy Kurapika is nowhere near that generous though. At the time of York New City, yes, retrieving the Scarlet Eyes was important to him, but of equal importance was making sure that the Phantom Troop were not only removed from this world, but they suffer and ideally feel a sense of remorse just prior to them being removed mercilessly from existence. And this is shown very clearly in his brief flashback with Izunami, when Kurapika says that there are people at large who need to be chained to hell. And that is a very powerful and slightly terrifying statement to make, because all of a sudden it seems like the recovery of the Scarlet Eyes and laying his clan to rest is actually a secondary task, with the first being to inflict as much, I suppose, damnation on the Phantom Troop as possible. And once again, this is all epitomized within the conflict with Uvogin, because Kurapika doesn't seem to go into this fight with the simple goal of defeating him. He wants to impact Uvogin and destroy him mentally as well as physically. He wanted Uvogin to suffer as much as he and his clansfolk had essentially, and you can see this in action as he repeatedly gloats in front of Uvogin, saying stuff like, "Is that the best punch you've got?" or going so far as to reveal his eyes and explain his ridiculously overpowered nen abilities, or even more so, pushing Uvogin to use his full power. If Kurapika was going into battle with the objective of just ridding Uvogin from the world and enacting some sort of justice, then he would just kill Uvogin as quickly as possible, rather than drag out this interaction. And yes, the argument can be made that Kurapika was only pushing Uvogin to that 100% point in order to test out his own limits and make sure that his nen abilities could handle the rest of the troop. But then again, that's only true in the case of Chain Jail. And even then, it was meant to be a purely physical test, because Chain Jail enforces a state of Zetsu, so aura and nen are completely irrelevant by that point. So you do need to ask yourself, why did Kurapika push Uvogin into a state of maximum aura output with lines like, "Stop wasting my time, use your full power"? And well, in my personal reading of it, it was to inflict a maximum sense of despair upon Uvogin. It was to make him feel powerless and completely outclassed, just as the members of the Kota clan had felt when Uvogin was slaughtering them for personal profit. In essence, it wasn't a sneaky, cheap victory victory, which Kurapika was perfectly capable of achieving. He made sure to allow Uvogin to max himself out before promptly smacking him back down with the giant metaphorical hammer of Kurta justice. Or at least that was the general idea. But did this actually work? Kurapika went into this fight with what I would say was close to a 100% chance of victory. Uvogin's fate was actually sealed the very moment he encountered Kurapika a second time. With that said, I'm gonna throw in another little twist thing here, because even with all of that in mind, in my opinion, this entire conflict was an overwhelming defeat for Kurapika. And a lot of this has to do because of the criteria that Kurapika himself had set. I remind you of that quote again: there are people in this world who need to be chained to hell. Kurapika wanted Uvogin to suffer, perhaps even repent. Well, you know what? We don't even have to go that far. He wanted Uvogin to show some sort of emotional response to being the target of revenge. He wanted Uvogin to know that his prior actions were going to cause his death and elicit some sort of anger, fear, bargaining, whatever. But Uvogin gave Kurapika nothing. But then there's also the other side of this coin as well. We do need to assess what Uvogin's goal in this conflict was, and it's not entirely simple because it does change throughout the battle. Interestingly enough, at first Uvogin is also out for revenge. He breaks out of his imprisonment and swears to kill Kurapika. However, just before the fight actually begins in earnest, this goal changes because the two chat briefly and Kurapika makes his own goal of revenge clear. And as such, Uvogin responds by saying the following: "You know what gives me the most pleasure? Taking Avengers like you and smacking them down." Which I should say is the Viz manga translation of the events. The official anime subtitles make the statement even more interesting, because in that incarnation, Uvogin says that what he loves most in this world is denying those who come in search of revenge. But that there is our setup. Kurapika wants Uvogin to suffer for his actions, and Uvogin wants to deny Kurapika that satisfaction. So with that in mind, how does this battle play out? Well, not well for Kurapika, not very well at all. And this ranges from very simple things like Kurapika trying to provoke Uvogin into a state of rage, which simply doesn't work. I mean, I briefly mentioned before that he tried to gloat by asking Uvogin if that was the strongest punch he had, which did twig Uvogin briefly, but he pretty immediately recovered and even used the challenge to generate a sense of excitement within himself. For a lot of this fight, he was having the time of his life. And in fact, even in some of Uvogin's final moments when Kurapika revealed his scarlet eyes, instead of feeling any sense of, oh shit, Uvogin just remembered how strong the Kurta clan was and got even more excited, despite the fact that he was helplessly trapped within chain jail already. There was no fear whatsoever in this man, and everything Kurapika was doing to him only had the opposite effect of what was intended. And meanwhile, I can't really say that Kurapika was doing too well mentally himself, and actually you can tell quite a bit about his temperament from a prior conversation that occurred with Uvogin when he was initially captured. The spider was completely calmed whilst Kurapika immediately lost his cool and lashed out against a defenseless Uvogin. From there to now, nothing had really changed. So as much as Kurapika at all times held both the physical and tactical advantages, Uvogin always held the emotional upper hand. This man is an emotional rock. He could not be moved by anything that Kurapika could throw against him. Meanwhile, Kurapika's rage only grew and grew, especially when it became clear to Uvogin that there would be no escape, and he just calmly said, "Kill me." And then there was the final moment where Kurapika used Judgment Chain on Uvogin in an attempt to extract information about the other troop members, and instead of trying to salvage or even prolong his life, Uvogin just said, "Get lost, fool," and embraced death, denying Kurapika almost everything that he came into this fight seeking. Uvogin died satisfied that he had denied a sense of vengeance to Kurapika. Whatever victory there was entirely empty. All Kurapika gained from it was a bulky corpse to bury. Otherwise though, this was, like I said, completely empty. And not only that, you could even make an argument that at the end of all of this, Uvogin was the more noble combatant in this battle. And that's because as much as he is obviously a mass murderer, in the end he prioritized the well-beings of his comrades over his own life. For someone who willingly took part in a genocide, he showed this bizarre sense of nobility that all of the core troop members have, and this is a huge part of the reason why Uvogin is so highly regarded amongst the spiders. It's not just because of his insane strength, it's because of his loyalty and camaraderie. It's absolutely twisted beyond all hell, but that's just the reality of the Phantom Troop. And from their perspective, Uvogin would have died as a hero, perhaps even a martyr. But then when we look back at Kurapika, and well, what was he actually? Was he some sort of noble avenger? Not really, because there isn't anybody who would gain satisfaction from Uvogin's death. Not even Kurapika himself, because he failed to extract any of his own personal desires from it, the large majority of which were rooted in absolute darkness anyway. And that is a very clear window into Kurapika's future in Hunter x Hunter. So long as he pursues the path of revenge, every encounter is going to end in this manner, and I think that he very much realized that by the end of York New City, and after Pakunoda's incidental death. To this day, Kurapika has not actually killed anybody in his quest to reclaim the Scarlet Eyes. Although it is implied that he has committed plenty of other horrid actions, but he has not taken a life directly for his vendetta. He has of course killed people out of acts of self-defense, but that's a different matter. And I think that's because he recognizes that Uvogin's death brought him a grand total of nothing. And here is where I should probably lay out some differences in the 1999 anime incarnation, because it is quite fascinating. The concept I've gone through here is essentially the same, except they make the idea a lot clearer. Some may even say they smack you over the head with it, but with a couple of very major differences. The most profound is that in the Izunavi flashback, they give him the following piece of dialogue. Even if you are successful, you'll have nothing to gain from it. You'll only be left with emptiness and blood on your hands. You don't have the strength to carry that burden. This is your last chance. Let it go. Forget revenge. And this is kind of wow, because neither the manga nor the 2011 anime incarnation, which follows the manga more closely, has Izunavi come anywhere close to making a statement like this. And in fact, he's actually fully supportive of Kurapika's revenge quest, although he does attempt to restrain him from making actions that are a bit too hasty and self-destructive. But at no point does he deliver anything close to this kind of noble dialogue to try and convince Kurapika not to embark on his journey. And so I think this dialogue from the 1999 version is just fleshing out the idea for the audience a lot more. I don't think it's necessary because all of the pieces are there to embody that meaning though. And they do go on to highlight the idea further, because another very interesting change is made immediately after Kurapika kills Uvogin, which is that he hunches over and covers his face with his hand, like he's just gone into a state of shock as a result of the act of killing. Once again, this is absolutely not present in the manga or the 2011 anime, where Kurapika just moves on with his life afterwards as a bit of an empty shell. So it is interesting that the 1999 version chose to more fully depict a negative effect of his actions. And I'm certain that this is what Kurapika is feeling on the inside, this kind of struggle between rage incarnate and the sheer disgust and horror that he probably feels regarding himself. The 1999 version just chose to more physically express it. Now, and as for one final difference before the battle actually starts, we see Kurapika saying a prayer to the Kurta clan with lines like, "I shall sing eternal praise to the people of Kurta," which establishes his goal is more noble than I think it is in reality. And in general, I think the 1999 anime version attempts to cast Kurapika as much more redeemable than he is in the other two versions, more like a lost soul in a torrent of darkness rather than a creature conjuring said torrent of darkness, which is what I would say the manga and the 2011 versions of him are. But look, no matter what version we look at, this conflict remains supremely impressive. I for one love that Togashi can very consistently structure fights with a physical victor who ends up being the overall loser. And that's a point I've explored with Gon vs Pito, and just as with that one, I'm sure that there are going to be many people out there who disagree with the idea that Uvogin won this encounter. But in the end, he died entirely proud of his life, as well as his final actions in denying Kurapika any sense of satisfaction from actually killing him. Meanwhile, Kurapika lived on, having not only failed in what he wanted to achieve from Uvogin, but also having lost part of himself, and then just continuing to trudge forward on his incredibly self-destructive path. Uvogin won the battle of emotion and the struggle of ideals. Meanwhile, all Kurapika won was a corpse. Not the greatest of outcomes, but a beautiful portrayal of revenge in action, as well as one of my favorite fight scenes in all of media from Togashi. But what do you guys think? Please do leave your thoughts in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more Hunt Hunt content, then please do go and check out some of my other videos, or even subscribe to the channel for regular Hunt Hunt glory delivered straight into your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.